With Stitch's Tropical Turbulence returning to the EN server and my very own vacation coming up, I've been thinking a lot about summertime activities, and I figured it might be fun to have another little Would You Rather game themed around this event for y'all to enjoy while it's still live. After all, only a few of our favorite boys get to enjoy this island adventure in canon, which seems like a bit of a shame, no? So today I'll be inviting all of the NRC students along with a few special guests, to this tropical getaway. I'll also be cavorting with our bestie, The Wheel, to pair them up for our consideration in Stitch-inspired scenarios. As always, I'll make sure to keep my thoughts to myself until all the questions have been asked, so you can play this little game by yourself or with a friend uninterrupted and uninfluenced. I'm also super curious to know who you picked and why, so don't feel shy and comment your choices down below. And before we begin in earnest, it's worth noting that these scenarios are going to be inspired by the event, but some will also be inspired by the OG Lilo and Stitch movie. So while I'm going to do my best to keep things as spoiler-free as possible, there may be a couple little things that get past me. So consider this your spoiler warning. Now then, are y'all ready to dive in? Good, then let's begin. Would you rather customize your surfboard with Leona or Kaleem? Would you rather gather firewood with Deuce or Vil? Would you rather collect seashells with Ruggy or Ortho? Would you rather taste test tropical fruit with Agent of Bubbles or Trey? Would you rather enjoy some ice cream or snow cones with Ruggy or Ace? Would you rather go swimming in the ocean with Fleekly or Floyd? Would you rather explore the jungle with Malleus or Cater? Would you rather build the bungalow with Edia or Deuce? Would you rather fight Gontu's robots with Rook or Malleus? Would you rather dance around the campfire with Gontu or Edia? Would you rather build a spaceship, functionality optional, with Leona or Sebek? Would you rather go fishing with Apple or Cater? Would you rather watch the sunrise or sunset with Nani or Trey? Would you rather cook up a storm with Stitch or Kaleem? Would you rather champion mosquito conservation with Riddle or Jumba? Would you rather adopt a hermit crab or two with Lilia or Zool? Would you rather be lifeguards with Ace or Jamil? Would you rather learn to surf with Lilo or Azul? Would you rather perform a fireside duet with Apple or Jade? Would you rather enjoy a beachside stroll with Bill or Rook? That is the end of our questions. Have you all made your choices? Good, then let's compare notes. Our first question was, would you rather customize your surfboard with Leona or Kaleem? For this one, I'm going with Kaleem. I just know that Leona's going to draw a singular line on his and then call it quits. There's no way that he's putting effort into this activity, and it's not going to be fun for me if he does that. Kaleem, on the other hand, is likely to get really into it, and I feel like he'd also have a lot of good suggestions for designs or additions and things of that nature. I also think it'll be much easier to pass the time by chatting and painting with Kaleem too, as I'm sure he'd be down to trade stories or talk about the goings-ons in the island, perhaps even some juicy gossip from school, whatever strikes our fancy in the moment. I might even be able to convince him to do an exquisite corpse type thing where we both do half of our boards and then swap and finish the other person's. We'd end up with some really unique designs that way, and we'd also have a little piece of one another to remember the occasion by. And Kaleem would actually put effort into this idea versus Leona, who would likely, again, just draw a single line on both of his halves to be done with it. That's my thinking anyways, so that's why I'm gonna go with Kaleem. For our second question, gathering firewood with Deuce or Vil? Honestly, I think both are good choices here, but I don't have much in the way of muscles to be able to hold things for an extended period of time. And I have a feeling that Vil is going to be very insistent that I carry my own weight, whereas Deuce might be a bit more gentlemanly and carry a couple things for me, so I'm going to go with Deuce here. Deuce is a bit better of an option for me anyway, since I think we'd have more to talk about, and I think I'd get along better with him than Vil. I just don't get the whole beauty thing that well, and while this would be a fantastic time to learn, I can't help but feel that Vil wouldn't give his advice for free, and I just don't think that we would vibe as well generically. Deuce is a bit more straightforward and earnest, which is something that I appreciate, and I think it would make our conversing a bit easier. Outside of that, though, I don't really have much to nitpick, as I think both would be excellent conversation partners, both would not complain about the task, and they would both actually do the task, so it really just came down to the vibes for me. Our third question was collecting seashells with Ruggy or Ortho. This one was really hard because I want to collect shells with both of them. I think Ortho would have a fantastic time discovering all of the different varieties of shell, while Ruggy would be better at finding those hidden gems in the sand. But since I do have to pick just one, I'm going to go with Ortho here for one simple reason. He's got no internet access. This is a deserted island, completely cut off from the world at large, and I somehow doubt Ortho would be able to access the internet here given the other random limitations of the storybook space. Therefore, this would be a fantastic time for him to learn organically and rely on himself to discover that which lays in the sand, and I think it would be awesome to witness him on this journey. Will he take pictures to research later? Will he just enjoy the here and now? Perhaps a bit of both. My heart is stirring at the endless possibilities as we speak. Our fourth question was taste testing tropical fruit with Agent Bubbles or Trey. I feel like this was a wild question to get Agent Bubbles on, so since he's here, I'm going to sample fruit with him. I cannot remember the last time I watched Lilo and Stitch, but I would just love to get any sort of crumb of information about the CIA alien info from this guy. And what better way to do that than to share stories over some island delicacies? Trey would also be a good pick here since he's got a rather refined palate and would probably talk about the baking potential of the fruits, or just the culinary applications at large. The only problem I can foresee happening with Trey is Trey censoring himself as to not appear rude or to hog the conversation, since he usually just wants to blend into the background as much as possible, which would limit the perk of having him with you a little bit. Agent Bubbles may not be forthcoming with the alien info, but there is at least a chance. That and Honestly, Trey does scare me a little bit. He's unnerving in a way that I could never really articulate well, so I just rather not be alone with him if possible. Not that I think he's a threat like Jade or Floyd, but he's off-putting, I think because he reminds me of someone I used to know who was not great. So I just have this odd feeling around Trey that just would make this scenario a little uncomfy. So Agent Bubbles, it is. Our next question was enjoying some ice cream or snow cones, whatever flavor floats your boat, with Ruggy or Ace. I think at this point, if you've been around my channel for long enough, you probably are aware that I dislike Ace. So this one was very easy for me because it is Ruggy all the way. I swear, Ace and I would bicker the whole time, and I would get distracted and drop my ice cream. And he would laugh so hard that he ends up dropping his ice cream, and now we're both angry and don't have ice cream. With Ruggy, this wouldn't be a problem. If anything, he'd just try to get an extra scoop or two on my dime, and honestly, I cannot be mad at that. Heck, I wouldn't even mind giving Ruggy my ice cream if he really wanted it, because the boy needs to eat. And while desserts are not very nutritious, it's still something. I also think Ruggy would be less picky since he kind of eats whatever so long as it's not moldy, which doesn't really matter all that much, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things. But I do think it would make the process of acquiring and then eating the sweets easier. Plus, I'd just much rather chat with Ruggy, so the hyena it is. Now, the next question was going swimming in the ocean with Pleakley or Floyd. Go swimming with the goofy alien or go swimming with the very naughty eel? Which to choose? Which to choose? As much as I adore Floyd, I'm gonna go with Pleakley here, because I would very much like to avoid the possibility of drowning as much as possible, as I've already had my fair share of experiences with this, and I just can't help but feel like Floyd would get a kick out of dragging me under every once in a while, catching me off guard, and I just rather not have that stress. So Pleakley it is, and honestly, he would be such a delight to chat with. I can't remember if Pleakley is chill with the ocean or not, so maybe he wouldn't want to go too deep in the water, which isn't that much of a problem, as I wouldn't be heartbroken if we just sat in the shallows and chatted. If I'm remembering correctly too, then Pleakley would also be super prepared and bring like all of the things like sunblock and chairs and towels, etc., which would also be super helpful for our beach day as well. So Pleakley it is. Our next question is exploring the jungle with Malleus or Cater. This one was super easy. It is Malleus all day, every day, because if we run into any difficulty at all, he can just tackle it without breaking the sweat. Cater is a lovely fellow who would be way more chatty, but Cater also isn't inclined to hike nearly as much as Malleus is. Even though I've been talking about how the folks I'm picking would be easier or more fun to chat with during whatever scenario we're in this particular scenario, I'd actually rather have peace and quiet, which Malleus will provide in spades. I'm sure as we occasionally pass something of interest, we'll have a chat about it, but I think he'd be happy to casually stroll in silence too, which would be a boon in this situation. We might miss all the lovely bird calls and animal noises otherwise, and that's half of the fun of being in the jungle, no? We may get a little lost or lose track of time, but with such wonderful company, is that really an issue? I don't think so. After all, we are on a giant circle, so eventually, statistically, we'd make it back to the bungalow. Our next question was, would you rather build the bungalow with Idia or Deuce? So this one might be a little surprising, but I have my reasons for picking Idia. See, Deuce would be much better at the actual construction piece since he's not scared of physical activity, but we do have a bit of a problem. In fact, it's quite a big problem, and that's that neither of us can do math. You know the saying about measuring twice and then cutting once? I don't think that Deuce and I would have enough brain cells between us to remember that. Idia, however, is very smart and can in fact do math, which is surprisingly necessary for this type of work. Therefore, Idia can handle the schematics, the calculations, and the checking twice before I cut once, while I handle the more physically intensive tasks like lifting the boards, nailing things together, construction stuff. Now, I would probably have to rope in Jack or someone to help with the actual raising of the walls and the roofing, but up until that point, I think I've got enough muscle to do the basics. making Idia and I a pretty solid team. Our next question was fighting Gantu's robots with Rook or Malleus. And as much as I'd love to see Rook in action, I think the obvious choice is to go with Malleus here. I may have enough muscle to slap a few boards together for the house, but I ain't got none to deal with the metal robots. So whoever I'm with is going to have to make up the difference. Malleus isn't even going to break a sweat dealing with these things. He's just going to zap them out of existence like he's swatting a fly, which is not only impressive, but efficient too. We can get back to whatever we were doing much more quickly, and he's got all of the muscle required to take the parts back to Stitch. I'll help, of course, but again, I can't carry that much, so I'll also be relying on the dragon for that sort of stuff too. The next question was dancing around the campfire with Gantu or Idia. Idia? Dance? In front of people? You might as well be asking him to slay the Hydra. Are you insane? Now, Gantu ain't my favorite character by any stretch, and I also think he'd stubbornly refuse to join me for a dance, but I do also think I would at least have a chance with him, so that's who I'm choosing here. I'm not hopeful in the slightest, but if I did happen to somehow convince the shark to join me for a number, then I think I'd at least be entertained. I don't think Gantu would be a good dancer, just like me, but unlike me, he is much, much bigger and would draw more attention. So my stage fright would be mitigated significantly and I'd be able to have a much better time of it. So that's why I'm going with him here. Next up is building a spaceship, functionality optional, with Leona or Sebek. I gotta go with Sebek here because I think it would be an experience to try to collaborate with this crocodile, and I again don't think Leona is going to put in any effort at all. Sebek will be stubborn, of course, and he'll likely insist on the design having something to do with Malleus or the Briar Valley, but I'm totally okay with that. Maybe we'd make a dragon-shaped spaceship in order to honor his liege, or maybe we'd just make some cool briar decorations. I don't know, but I think it would end up looking really cool. I'm also totally okay with Sebek taking charge here and making the majority of the decisions. I do not want to fight him on this and then lose my construction buddy to Sebek's stubbornness. And honestly, I don't really care that much about the finished product. It'd just be nice to get to spend some time, hopefully peacefully, with the guy and learn even more about Malleus perhaps in the process. Next up, we have going fishing with Epple or Cater. Now, this one was another toughie because both of these guys would be fun to fish with. I feel like Epple would likely have fished before, so he's got that on Cater, but fishing is also a relatively boring and time-consuming affair, in which Cater's chattiness would be a huge boon. After some careful consideration, I decided to go with Cater because I think the conversation would be more fun, and even if he did go quiet and contemplative for a bit, I wouldn't mind. Plus, he'd be taking all sorts of good pictures along the way, so we'd have a lot of memories to look back on too. This might also be a good time to gently prod him to open up a bit about his woes, depending of course on how buddy-buddy we were or weren't. But I think some time by the sea, staring out at the ocean, hearing the calming sounds of the waves, just seems like the kind of environment that would be good for Cater's mental health, and maybe it would be the perfect backdrop for such a conversation. Who knows? Next up, we have watching the sunrise or sunset with Nani or Trey. Yet again, I don't really feel super comfortable around Trey, so Nani gets my vote here. I think I'd prefer sunset to sunrise because I am not a morning person and I do not want to be cranky with a stranger if I can avoid it. I think it would also just be interesting to chat with Nani about her life. How's it going? How's Lilo? How's Stitch? As we watch the sunset and maybe even watch the kiddos run around the beach in the process. But I don't really have too many other thoughts here. I just know that I don't want to chill with Trey. So Nani kind of got this one by default. Our next question was, cook up a storm with Stitch or Kaleem? Both of these options are going to be somewhat chaotic, just in slightly different ways. However, I think Kaleem actually has some cooking skills, so I'm gonna go with him here. Now, Kaleem isn't allowed to use knives, so he may have to use magic, but we're also on an island with limited resources, and do shells really count as knives? I don't know. I'd probably have to consult with Jamil. But regardless, Kaleem and I could likely craft something edible. Folks really seem to like his food in his labware vignettes, so we may be able to replicate that here. Or we might fail. But I think even our failure would still be edible, just perhaps not as tasty. I think Kaleem would be a bit easier to work with too, as I feel like Stitch can be surprisingly stubborn sometimes, and if he happens to get stubborn during our cooking, it could end less desirably. So I'm sticking with Kaleem. Our next question is championing mosquito conservation with Riddle or Jumba. Honestly, I think Pleakley and I can convince Riddle that mosquito conservation is a real thing and that we should absolutely spread the word about it. So I'm gonna pick Riddle here. Riddle's already a stickler for the rules, so if we can convince him that this cause is worth pursuing, then I imagine he'd be on board. Skeptical still, sure, but on board nonetheless. That, or he'd join our misinformed crusade just to ensure that we follow all of the local guidelines and ordinances for preaching, which could lead to some really funny interactions too. Or maybe Riddle just might be interested in the whys and hows of this sort of thing, which could also lead to his involvement. I'm not sure exactly how he would get involved, but I think he'd be a fair hand better at whatever angle he chooses to engage with us from than Jumba, who I don't really recall ever caring that much about the mosquitoes in the movie. So Riddle it is here. Next up is adopting a hermit crab or two with Azul or Lilia. Why do I feel like both of these guys would be a chaotic co-pet parent? Azul is from the sea, so he could more easily care for the hermit crab or crabs, I think. But Lilia's also got a lot more experience parenting and caring for folks than Azul does. Because of that, I think I'm gonna go with Lilia here. I feel like I'd probably be the one doing the most looking after out of the two of us, but I think Lilia would have more fun with the overall experience and would go out of his way to make it fun for me too. He's definitely making tiny outfits for the crabs and taking them on adventures when it's his turn to parent. Plus, with the help of Uncle Cater, these little guys are going to be magic hand stars too, and Uncle Kaleem is going to spoil them with all sorts of treats. Or maybe we aren't co-parenting and just have our own hermit crabs that we bring together for play dates or something. In such a case, Lilia is going to be way more on board with this than Azul would be, given how precious Azul's time is. So I think Lilia is the best choice here. Next up, we have being lifeguards with Ace or Jamil. There's no way Ace takes this seriously enough until there is an incident, and even then I feel like he'd ask me to take care of it, so I'm going with Jamil. I hate to give Jamil any more work than he already has, but if Kaleem is one of the people out there swimming, Jamil's going to be watching the water like a hawk anyways, and he's much more responsible to begin with, so I imagine we'd have a higher success rate anyways. Jamil also isn't one to be overly chatty, I think, which would make it easier for us to focus on the job at hand too. Funnily enough, I have similar qualms about spending time with Jamil as I do with Trey, as Jamil's overall attitude reminds me a lot of an individual I've had the displeasure of dealing with IRL. But I think in this specific context, it's much better to go with Jamil anyways due to him being more generically responsible, so I'll stand by my choice here. Next up, we have learning to surf with Lilo or Azul. So this is a repeat question from the first event Would You Rather that I'd hoped I'd get different folks for, and technically I did, because Lilo is here now. But I also got Azul again, and I think I'm going to pick him again for similar reasons. Lilo would be fun to hang around, I think, but as the adult, I'd have a lot more responsibility and pressure on me to ensure Lilo's safety, which is totally fine and dandy, but since I also don't know how to surf, it would be dangerous for both of us if I was in charge. So instead, I'll be surfing with Azul, who can save me if all else fails due to his merman nature. Also, because of this, if he happens to wipe out and ends up in the sea for an extended period of time, he could just, transform and then be fine. Technically, the magical clothes in the event would be an issue here, but I think in a life or death hypothetical, these clothes might be a little more cooperative, so I'm still sticking with Azul here. Next up, we have performing a fireside duet with Apple or Jade. Now here I'm going with Apple for sure because this sort of thing is his bread and butter. Spoiler alert for the Harvest and Sudathon, in case you are not acquainted and don't want to be, but in that event, there is a scene where the townsfolk throw our little group a party in the town hall before the big race. During said party, folks begin dancing and playing music, which Apple explains is a cultural tradition in Harveston. So given that this little campfire is kind of a party, or at least a gathering of our group to enjoy time together, I think he'd be right at home doing some musical improv with someone else. Jade also has musical talents, given that he and the rest of the trio used to be in a jazz band together, but I feel like because of that, the stakes would be a bit higher with him. Like in Harveston, everyone just had a good time regardless of the skills of the people playing the music or dancing or what have you. But I feel like Jade would be quite judgy even if he doesn't show it, and I'd rather not be scrutinized so closely, so I'm sticking with Apple. And our last question, enjoying a beachside stroll with Vil or Rook? If there ever was a question that relied so heavily on personalities, this would be it. I think even more so than some of the others we've had in this consideration, and given my previously discussed hesitations with Vil, this has got to be Rook for me. I think either of these guys would be a delight to hang out with on a casual stroll, but I'd very much like to hear Rook's poetic chatter as we saunter along, and I think he'd notice way more things than Vil would. I wouldn't mind him pointing out all sorts of subtle little details, maybe even spotting some dolphins or something on the horizon, that sort of thing. It may also be nice to learn more about Rook as he comes across in a very particular way, but I can't help but feel that he's got a surprising amount of depth that we don't often get to see. Whether he'd be willing to show that side of himself is another question entirely, but it would be fun to hang out with him regardless. And that's all of my picks for these hypothetical scenarios. I wonder how many of you agreed or disagreed with me and what your rationales were for your picks. Let me know your thoughts down below, and while you're there, I would appreciate it if you could also let me know if you like this sort of content and want more like it. Likes and subscribes are always appreciated too, and before you go, I just have to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.